This is U.S. History Regents Review, Unit 4, video number 6. We finished talking about how the United States is starting to engage in expansion and imperialism, empire building. This is our foreign policy at the turn of the 20th century. The Spanish-American War is what launched the start of our expansion, and it also sparked the debate between pro and anti-imperialists. So what was the debate? What were the arguments? In general, take a look. Pro-imperialists were in support of the ideas that, hey, we need new markets to sell our goods. We need to have a stronger navy. We need to civilize and Christianize the rest of the world. And we need to be able to compete with Europe. And again, those are a lot like the 5Ds: destiny, democracy, deity, defense, and dollar. And some of the major imperialists were Theodore Roosevelt, who's a big proponent, Senator Henry Cabot Lodge, Alfred Mahan, while others were anti-imperialists. They felt that it was inherently un-American to dominate another people. That's kind of hypocritical. We should continue the tradition of isolationism and avoid foreign entanglements, just like George Washington told us to do. Imperialism would shift attention away from domestic reform. So remember, the progressive movement is going on at this point in time, and getting involved abroad is going to distract us from how important this movement is. And the only people really benefiting would be big business. So the progressive era is all about trying to limit the power of big business and regulate it. And really, imperialism, it benefits those who are already powerful and wealthy. So I like this cartoon. It shows imperialism. It shows it like, the temptation is a worldwide empire, but Lady Liberty is being held back by the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, which shows that, these values don't really match up. Others thought, hey, others will be able to enjoy the benefits of being an American and celebrate with us. Major anti-imperialists included Andrew Carnegie, Jane Addams, that really famous progressive, Mark Twain, William Jennings Bryan, Booker T. Washington, and Grover Cleveland, former president. So there is, a big debate between these two groups, and they both have different reasons for why they support or oppose imperialism. And we're going to have document time, just 2 short documents as examples. There are oftentimes documents about this debate because you'll see people had really strong opinions for why we should or should not imperialize. So these are just some samples. So this one is by Josiah Strong. He was a missionary, and he's talking about his experiences and why we should imperialize in his book, Our Country. The two great needs of mankind, that all men may be lifted into the light of the highest Christian civilization, are first, a pure spiritual Christianity, and second, civil liberty. It follows then that the Anglo-Saxon, as the great representative of these two ideas, the depository of these two great blessings, sustains peculiar relations to the world's future, is divinely commissioned to be, in a peculiar sense, his brother's keeper. So you might look at that and be like, what? Anglo-Saxons, those are people from usually like a British background. So he's talking about like pure white people. And they have been given these two huge blessings that everybody needs, the two great needs of mankind. They need Christianity, and not just Christianity, but Christian civilization. So our values, our culture, and civil liberty, meaning our values, our democratic values. So we have, again, the white man's burden, a special blessing and responsibility to make sure that everyone else has it. This has meaning for the world's future. We are our brother's keeper. That's a biblical quote, that we are responsible for other human beings, making sure that they have Christianity and democracy. But let's look at anti-imperialist response. This is by a really interesting individual. His name is Emilio Aguinaldo, and he was the leader of the Filipino independence movement. So he fought against the Spanish at first, and then later against the United States when we did not grant the Philippines freedom. So he says, "You repeat constantly the dictum that we cannot govern ourselves. And a little over 100 years ago, it was extremely questionable when you, the United States, also were rebels against the English government, if you could govern yourselves. Now, the moral of all of this, obviously, is give us the chance. Treat us exactly as you demanded to be treated at the hands of England when you rebelled against her autocratic methods." So he's guilting us here by remembering the American Revolution. Hey, remember how you, the 13 colonies, wanted freedom from Great Britain and people said you would never be able to govern yourselves? Yeah, remember that? That's all that we want here in the Philippines. And he finishes this whole speech by blatantly calling the United States hypocritical. We don't do what we say or believe. After the Spanish-American War, we go off and we get involved in a whole bunch of other places. So take a careful look at this timeline. Here are the main ones you should know. It's like the first thing ever, we purchased Alaska. But then we get involved in Hawaii. Queen Liliuokalani is a sovereign monarch of this island nation, and we basically take over it. American planters who had interests in sugar and didn't want to pay foreign tariffs, they took over Hawaii. And then the United States annexes it because that's what they wanted. And it's kind of controversial. Then we have the Spanish-American War. We decide to go ahead and annex Hawaii. We gain the Philippines, Guam, Puerto Rico. Another important term to know, Secretary of State John Hay writes the open door policy, saying that we should have open trade in China, that Europe should not have these spheres of influence, but we should all have equal access to China. And China actually didn't want to trade with anybody, but Europe had forced China to allow foreigners in to trade. So John Hay wants the same thing for the United States, an open door. We need to be able to trade with China too, even against their will. Then in 1903, Theodore Roosevelt personally leads this effort to get access to Panama to build a canal. When the Colombian government refuses, we fund and support a Panamanian revolution so that they could become their own country and then allow us to build a canal. And they lease the land to us for almost a century. So we do that by force. That's something Theodore Roosevelt was very proud of and he thought was a big success. And then finally, an important note, Theodore Roosevelt has his Roosevelt Corollary. So let's take a look at that. You might see on the exam cartoons related to imperialism. This first one shows you Theodore Roosevelt just kind of digging his way through Panama. And then this other one is Roosevelt carrying his toy boats around the Caribbean, parading the military strength and carrying his big stick. You might see a cartoon with him carrying a big stick because he used this phrase. He referenced it, speak softly and carry a big stick. Big stick diplomacy. It's the idea that, hey, we should try diplomacy first, try to work out things with other countries, but we really better have a big stick to back up anything we say. And the big stick is representative of military power, specifically the Navy. And in order to do this, he builds up our Navy. It's called the Great White Fleet, these big, powerful battleships that we basically parade around places like the Caribbean to show others how powerful we are, to intimidate them, and to make sure they do what we want when it comes to foreign policy. So again, we're going to be nice, but hey, if we need to use these battleships, there they are, looking really intimidating. And Roosevelt, his goal is to enforce the Monroe Doctrine. Remember, the Monroe Doctrine said that Europe needed to stay out of the Americas, not colonize anymore, because this was our turf now. So the Roosevelt Corollary is an addition to this, saying that we will back up the Monroe Doctrine with force, and we have the right to be a police power in this area. And this is the start of ourselves seeing us as this kind of police power. And again, you should think of the Panama Canal with Roosevelt.